Okay, moving right along, I'd like to welcome to the stage Fergus Clarke, the co-founder and COO of Lamplight Analytics here in Hong Kong. And he's going to be coming on stage with two of his angel investors. That's going to be Alan Chan of Vectr Ventures and angel investor Martin Haigh. So come on up, Alan and Martin. Hi, Martin. Okay, good. Let's roll it. Of course, and our moderator. I know we were waiting for something. Jennifer Thompson of the Financial Times, correspondent here from the Financial Times. Thank you very much. Okay, take it away now.
Well, hello everyone. I think of all the companies we've heard from so far, Lamplight is probably the youngest. It's your 1-year anniversary this month, I believe. So Lamplight was set up in November 2014. Fergus, if we could turn to you first, could you tell us a little bit about the business and what it does?
Sure. So we take data from social media globally, whether they're Western platforms like Facebook and Twitter, more regional platforms like WeChat, or even local platforms like here in Hong Kong, for example, Discuss HK or HK Golden. So we allow people to access what is being said about them online from more or less anywhere, over 20 million different individual sources. We then have natural language processing technology that derives meaning from all that data. So in a practical sense, what that means is that if you're, for example, KPMG and you want to know what people coming out of university are saying about you as a potential employer, we can allow you to do that.
And that's not a particularly local accent I'm hearing. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your route into Hong Kong and your route into this business.
Sure, this is a highly modified Irish accent for ease of understanding. So I'm originally from Dublin. I moved to London and worked in market research for many years, mostly for WPP agencies. So what I was doing was essentially trying to tell companies what their market thinks of them, to inform things like product development, advertising, and other marketing activities. I got sent here to Hong Kong for a year to do advertising research with Millward Brown, mostly working with Coca-Cola and LG, so to help them create better adverts through understanding their customers better. I then moved back to London for a little bit before running an American PR company's research business in Middle East Africa, based out of the UAE. When they wanted to open their first Asia office, they sent me here to do that. So it's kind of, that's part of the reason why I wanted to start Lamplight. When I was working in market research, this is something that only very, very big companies can afford, people like Unilever and P&G. It's hugely useful, but I realized that it was a kind of an outmoded way of doing things. If you're doing surveys or focus groups, they're very, very expensive and time consuming. And yet we have, through social media, all this data about what people really, really think out there. So by systematizing it and building a product around it, we make it available not just to the likes of Unilever and P&G and Coca-Cola, but actually to small and medium-sized businesses as well. So you can now make data-driven, insight-driven decisions about a business, even if you've only got $500 a month to spend on it.
And I mean, in terms of, something like Google Analytics, I mean, there's quite a few general tools out there, which you can use. I mean, even as a journalist, I could use such tools, to track what people are, saying, and look at search engine optimization, those kind of topics. I mean, what kind of services do you offer? Basically, why would someone, require your services? What makes you different?
Well, Google Analytics is it's highly structured data, right? So it's where people are clicking, essentially. If they enter a search term, Google will count the number of times that keyword is used. What we're looking at is unstructured data. So it's not about just what people are clicking, it's about what they're thinking, what they're saying, what they're hearing from their friends and family. So it's much more, I guess, earlier in the purchase decision making, or just impression of a particular topic. It needn't necessarily be about a brand, and it's much more emotional. It's not so much the rational side of things.
Okay, can you give us a few examples of projects you've worked on recently, perhaps on the emotional side? I think that's something people might want to hear a bit more about, a sort of concrete example.
Sure. So I mean, going back to when we first set up, we thought we would spend a lot of time working with quite small companies trying to get a bit of traction so that we had a track record we could then take to larger companies. But as my co-founders and I sort of talked about it to people in our circle, we realized that there was already a lot of demand for this, that people could see, yes, this is something highly useful and I want it for my large business. So by the end of our first month, we'd actually signed Live Nation as our first client. Live Nation being the people who own Ticketmaster, so they do a lot of music promotion, they're bringing Madonna to Hong Kong, things like that. And the case they had for us was, how do I know, I have these Western artists that I've got signed to my roster, how do I know which cities in Asia to bring them to? So we can help see, we can look at where people are talking about a given artist who's on Live Nation's roster, so that they can pinpoint exactly where the most interest is in that particular artist and know where to book them in Asia.
And what did you say that was for Madonna? Where were the?
It wasn't for Madonna, but I couldn't possibly divulge.
Okay, sensitive information then. And I mean, you one of the sort of the key things about the services you provide is just the sheer number of languages excuse me, you can work in across Asia. And I mean, I know that often that is a problem getting the expertise for languages in Indonesia, lots of regional languages as well. How many languages do you currently provide?
Over 180. So,
over 180. Yes. Wow. Okay.
So it's a major language. We've got it. I mean, there was conversation earlier about why Hong Kong. And some of it's kind of fortuitous and so on, but actually for us, Hong Kong was a very deliberate decision. We're a global company as well. We have aspirations to be a global company, but we call ourselves Asia First, and that's very deliberate as well. It is the most complex, diverse region linguistically, culturally, economically, compared to everywhere else. There are, of course, as there are for every startup, other people attempting similar things elsewhere in the world. But if we crack it here, it's far easier for us to go west than it will be for someone to think they've got the US cracked or the UK cracked to try and bring it out here, because it's just so different in every way.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think 180 languages is just remarkable. I mean, how big a feat was that? Was that one of the main challenges in getting the business online?
Yeah, I mean, you always gotta, as much as possible, stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Build off stuff that other people have done before. So a lot of this stuff comes out of academia. The original technology comes from Stanford.
Okay.
So you take what's already been done and modify it and make it better, rather than trying to boil the ocean.
Yeah. And how have you found working in Hong Kong? And I know you and your co-founders all had a personal connection. It's obviously a great place, in many respects to do business. I think we can all agree on that. But there are challenges, particularly, if you're coming as an outsider. I mean, what have been, how have you found it, and particularly funding, for example? How have you found working in Hong Kong?
Well, maybe going sort of taking a more broad look and then zeroing in on funding. Obviously, the process of getting a business set up here is ridiculously easy. It takes an hour maybe. The challenges are around rent. Obviously, I think everybody agrees. I guess I would disagree a little bit with the last panel. I do think there is an issue here with a cultural issue. Not that young people don't want to work in startups, but just that their parents don't really want them to work in startups. So I think that's something that we need to work to overcome as a startup community. And the best way to do that is to start producing some very successful startups, which will start to change that culture very, very quickly, I think. In terms of funding, I mean, this is my first startup. I was working in corporates my entire career before that, so I don't really have a benchmark with which to compare it. However, I think with the support of the guys to my left and right and others, it's been a relatively drama-free process.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And I mean, in terms of, as you say, recruiting people to work for a startup, I mean, how many employees do you currently have in Hong Kong?
According to my people operations person, we've got 18.2.
18.2 people, okay. Well, of those, how did you recruit those 18.2 people? Were most of them just via word of, I mean, did you know them before, or were they sort of newbies you had to bring on board?
Some of them I knew before, some of them I poached from previous companies. Most of them I didn't. It really varies. So, obviously LinkedIn is a great tool. You can't wait for people to apply to you when you're a startup. You got to look for the right person and think, yeah, this person is great, and then actively reach out and try and get them for a coffee and tell them what you've got planned and ask them if they want to be a part of it. You want to try and avoid recruitment agencies as much as possible, particularly when you're bootstrapping, and even post-funding. But there's tools out there now that you can use. We also found some people through, for example, AngelList, where you just see who's looking at us on AngelList and say, okay, that person sounds interesting, and try and get them.
And you mentioned rents being a problem in Hong Kong. I know the rents in some office spaces have come down recently, although I think that's shaving maybe a few percentage points off an enormous bill. So it's beyond the reach of many entrepreneurs currently. I mean, where did you start up? I mean, where were you physically based to begin with?
Our first office was in Cyberport. That was when it was just the co-founders, because we were better able to make that trek there than employees would be if they're coming from somewhere in the new territories, for example. Hopefully that will become more viable when the MTR finally makes it out there. Then we moved into, we've actually got a private office in a co-working space, the Haigh in Kennedy Town, which we really like, but we've kind of spilling out of that now, so we're looking for somewhere a little bit more permanent.
Okay. And just turning to funding, how did you find Martin and Alan, or how did they find you? Perhaps Martin and Alan can take this one. Oh, are we short the microphones?
Hi, actually I knew one of the co-founders, Sam, very well.
Okay.
I was introduced by Thomas from Morrison Forrester, and so we pretty much do whatever Thomas says, so. He says, meet these guys, and yeah, so that's how we met him.
And I understand, Fergus, that you recently completed a successful funding round. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about who was involved with that, and how you want to use that money to grow the company.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, it's these guys that were involved with that, along with a few other private individuals. The main purpose of that was kind of to just turbocharge our growth, to start building out some of the business on top of the technology, if you see what I mean, as well as further developing the technology that we have.
Okay. And just going back to Martin and Alan again, can you talk us through a little bit about what you're looking for from, if a company pitches to you, or if you're interested in them, what would be the ingredients of a successful pitch for funding? Alan, perhaps you look.
I mean, that's pretty broad, I would say. Like, I'll just talk specifically with these guys, right? So when we first met them, we go through referrals a lot, because depending where we get the deal from, I mean, we actively email people back and say we don't take cold calls when they cold call us. And so, through Thomas, I know that anything that, people we trust sends out, we already have a basic level of confidence. And this is at least not going to be like a waste of time by listening to it, or this is not going to be like a totally crazy idea that's going to work 1 in a million times. It's something that makes sense. And then we usually look at the founders. Typically for us, our portfolio right now, our average age of founder is actually north of 35. Okay. And so when we met these guys, what we quickly established was, we've got crazy researcher here, and like a mad scientist like CTO, and a tank commander as their CEO. Okay. And we were like, okay, combining all their...
He actually was a tank commander, wasn't he? He was in the British Army. Okay, right. That wasn't just a metaphor. He was a...
And so in terms of, determination, know-how, and, we spoke on a business level. Our CTO talked with, we just did all the different levels. And we were very comfortable with everyone's knowledge in all their particular fields, and really thought the combination was great. We like the market, and we like sort of where it's going. And, it might be a little early, I think, for social analytics, maybe in Asia for big brands, but, our theory is always, when the market's ready, your product has to be ready already. You can't start by the time it's ready. So, when we found this opportunity, we thought it was very interesting. Okay. And selfishly, we wanted all of our portfolio companies to use them as well.
Okay. And just to wrap up, Fergus, could you perhaps give us a little insight into what you expect to see in social media analytics in Asia, perhaps over the next couple of years? I mean, we know it's sort of a growing field throughout the world, but you sort of get the sense that it's a little bit maybe more a little less developed in Asia. Sort of how do you see it growing, and what are your sort of expansion plans over the next year?
In terms of how social media analytics will grow, I think it's not actually that different here from the rest of the world. I think it's underdeveloped in the rest of the world as well. It's just it's better explained to people in the rest of the world. But what needs to happen, and what we're going to be working on, is integrating social media data with other data sources to give a kind of a holistic picture of your digital market, using some of the sources that you talked about, for example. I think the natural language processing technology, the ability of machines to understand human language, is going to improve as well. We're working on that. There are other very big players working on it in a different context for things like AI and new forms of interfaces as well. So that's definitely going to be a change, and that's what you can expect. In terms of our expansion plans, I mean, we want to have an office in Singapore sooner rather than later. After that, we will see where market demand takes us, because we already deal with some clients in the UK and the US who have an interest for one reason or another in our part of the world. Obviously, sort of China is the big one.
Yeah.
Here, you can imagine that we would need to have people servicing accounts in Shanghai sooner rather than later as well. Then you have Japan and Korea and places like that. So wherever the market takes us, that's where we'll go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and happy anniversary for your first year, and best of luck for the second one. And perhaps we can open the floor to a couple of questions.
Just one. If there's anyone, very quickly. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Fergus. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Martin.